There's a special type of voice training student that I work with a lot, who I see a lot of myself in, but I don't see talked about all that often. And I see a lot of myself in all of my students, but I feel like this more so refers to me in the present day as opposed to me in the past. These are trans folks with pristine voices that I would not recommend altering all that much, yet they still feel horrible about their voice and are desperate for some change. When we talk about what we're changing, it's two words: your voice. A whole lot of attention is given to that second word, voice, and not a lot to that first one, your. If you are having trouble feeling content and satisfied with you are going to have a lot more trouble feeling content and satisfied with your voice, because it is coming from and is inextricably linked with you. It might not be that you can't perceive hearing your voice as a feminine one, but that you can't perceive hearing a feminine voice coming from you. And there could be dozens of other insecurities wrapped up in this too. Maybe you think that you talk too fast because you think you take up too much space in conversation. Maybe you kind of disdain your regional dialect because you have anonymity towards where you came from. And most commonly, maybe you don't like your voice because it is and always will be coming from a trans woman. If passing is the lack of knowledge that someone is trans, you will never lack that knowledge. In fact, you are more intimately aware of it than anyone else in the world. So when you listen to yourself speak, are you trying to pass to yourself? Are you trying to hear a cis woman talking back to you? Like so much of the mental side of voice training, this can be broadened out to transition as a whole. And it comes down to this: if you place superiority in being a cis woman and you don't fully accept yourself as a trans woman, it is very hard to find peace in transition. It makes everything more difficult. Learning feminine skills, progressing in your career, finding community with women, confidence, obviously. Insecurity and trans identity is a barrier in all of those cases, and that includes voice training. So in voice training and listening back to yourself and analyzing your voice, here are some ways to think about it. Number one, shift your idealized self away from cis women and towards being the most inspiring trans woman you can be. That is an idealized self that is actually achievable, and understand that it is not a downgrade. Trans women do not exist as an anterior class of women. Number two, when listening to yourself and trying to interrogate whether or not you pass, do not ask this question: does this sound like me as a cis woman? Replace it with, does this sound like a voice that could conceivably come from a cis woman? Or, are there cis women that exist with a more masculine voice than what I'm hearing? This helps depersonify your voice, taking out that your descriptor that we discussed earlier. Number three, analyze your voice not through a spectrum of transness to cisness, but from masculine to feminine. More than this, break it down into individual vocal features. Analyze your voice through whether it is smaller or larger, lighter or heavier, more rigid or more smooth. These questions will give you a better understanding of where your voice stands in the details, rather than in the overarching picture of, does this sound like a girl? How much information can you actually get out of that, as opposed to these smaller questions? This will give you better direction on what you might want to explore. Speaking of direction, let's try to find some with number four. I want you to imagine yourself in a social situation and someone compliments your voice. What adjectives would you like for them to describe it with? Literally, if you want to, write them down now. Use these as vocal targets to move towards. Number five, acknowledge your progress. Appreciate your progress. Do not focus on how far away you might think you are from your goal. Instead, think about how far you've come. This video was heavily inspired by the Dr. K interview with ContraPoints. For anyone who hasn't seen it, I think it is well worth your watch. As always, you can find my Patreon and my lesson information through my website. Through Patreon, I give affordable weekly group lessons, and if you want to work one-on-one with me, sign up for my waitlist. Thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.